Sorry to keep you waiting. I was having a technical difficulty. Welcome to Ask the Rabbi Volume 1. Thank you for everybody who began posting questions into the chat. I will begin class by saying that we will beginning the class with the questions that I received. And we will go from there. You feel free to add questions into the live chat. So I'm going to start with, as Chazal say, Rishon, Rishon, and Acharain, Acharain. So the first question in the questions I received was a Pesach-related question. It can never be too early for Pesach. So the question was regarding electric stove coils. These are the coils that, when turned on, they turn a red color, indicating that they are heating. And they have to burn a certain amount of time in order to be koshered for Pesach. So usually there is not a temperature setting on the actual device, on the actual stove itself, to tell us the heat of the device. So you can test it. You can see if it's gotten hot enough when you turn it all the way on high by seeing if it will burn paper as it touches it. If it does that, it is at a very high temperature. Okay, that means it's at a very, very high temperature. If it just singes the paper, it's definitely over 500 degrees. So if you leave it at that high temperature for about an hour, you're good to go. So if it can get any hotter than that, if it gets up to, let's say, if the paper catches fire, so it's much a higher burn point, and it will take only a few minutes. But once you get it bright red, it's almost already koshered. So definitely we want to do that. Okay. The next question was about trapping and killing things on Shabbat, on Shabbos. Okay, so I'm just going to read the statement over here, and then I will respond to it. So there are exceptions to the halakha if the creature is damaging, okay, meaning it will potentially hurt you, like if it's poisonous or if you have an allergy. But what if someone has a phobia of that thing and it appears on Shabbos? Specifically, my mother-in-law has a phobia of cockroaches. She will literally cry if she sees one. So I've always wondered what happens if we see one in the house on Shabbat. Am I allowed to rid of it for her somehow, or do I literally have to just let the guy crawl around all Shabbat while she is beside herself? So that's an interesting question. So in this case, the question is, does this irrational fear constitute a chola she'ein bo sakana? Okay, so obviously a chola sheyesh bo sakana. If you are a sick person who is in danger, we can do things to save your life. There's no audio. Check to make sure that your audio is on. It says my microphone is on. Where was I? So if they are in danger, you can always save their life. So the question is a person who is not. So in those situations where you are going to suffer some type of pain or discomfort, you're allowed to remedy yourself with violating a rabbinic principle by using a kalach or yad, something that's not the actual way of doing it. And so there are ways of doing it in which way you don't actually violate the Sabbath. So what you could do is basically put a cup on top of it, and then slide a piece of paper underneath the cup, flip it, shake it, and then throw the thing outside so you haven't actually caught it because it's already in your house. So that's one way to do it. And that's the best way to do that, is to go ahead and take it in a cup and then toss it outside. I've actually availed myself of a 7-Eleven Slurpee cup to catch a mouse that was loose. That was kind of fun. And one time I used a milk crate. Milk crate was even more fun because mice, I guess, are pretty stupid. And as you notice, a milk crate is not a very good trapping device. But I used the milk crate to guide the mouse out. I've actually caught it in a shul. Okay, the next question was, person one offers to do a favor for person two. Okay, and they're going to use their truck to pull person two's trailer to their house. So person one is driving their own truck, and they're towing person two's trailer to person two's house. While parking the trailer, person one damages their own truck with the trailer belonging to person two. How would damages be dealt with? So when a person volunteers, they have a work contract with somebody. There's an idea. There's an idea of what's called schias po'alim, that you hire a daily laborer, and part of that contract to be to receive no compensation. And also part of the contract is that when you are taking care when you are volunteering to take care of somebody's item, you are now a shomer. You are now a guardian of said object. So what happens when you're doing somebody a favor and you break your own stuff? Well, the third consideration. Okay, so you have basically been in care of the item. The item is in good condition, so you completed your guardianship well. Right, you bailed well. Right, I think that's the official legal term in America, being a bailee. And the item was delivered as contracted, so you fulfilled your volunteership. So the only question is, what about damages along the way? Well, the only thing you could judge is whether or not there was some form of negligence on the part of another party for them to be liable to pay you back for the damage accrued your way. The thing is that when you agree to do a job, especially if a job requires some sort of skill, you are also volunteering that I'm doing volunteering differently. You're also volunteering that you are an expert in handling that thing. So, frankly, you are accepting all types of responsibilities upon yourself by saying, I had these credentials to tow and this and that, right? I saw a video one time of some idiot who exceeded the tow capacity on their truck. So I said, what's the tow capacity? 10,000. So they towed something that's 20,000. Well, yes, any vehicle can pull. The question is, can it stop? Right? So that this may have been a case of where they were towing the thing, and even though they were, so there would be no liability on the part of the owner of these items because that owner was not negligent. Person one needed to know what to do in order to deliver it properly. So therefore, so the only thing you can do over here is just do something to be nice to them for friendship, but there's no legal obligation at any point. There was no negligence. There was nothing hidden. There's nothing else. Okay, the next question was, what's the best way to deal with a Shabbat meal when you are not sure the level of kashrus of the hosts? Well, that's always tough. So the difficult thing with that is that it's you have to look at whatever available information there is. So generally speaking, the Achronim look at it like this. If you see somebody that regularly goes to shul and they're there all the time, and they generally practice, what everybody else does, then you can safely assume that they're going to keep a level of kashrus that would be fine. If they generally, it's sort of like if it looks and walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. And so we use that to rely on, even to say that certain types of ducks are kosher. There is a certain type of duck that doesn't quack, and so therefore that duck is deemed not kosher, and it's not kosher for shechita, whatever. It's called a Muscovy duck. It actually hisses, so therefore we don't have a proper tradition for that thing to be assumed to be kosher. People, lahavdil, are kind of the same way. We're kind of saying that when we see that they normally practice that way. If you see people who have leniencies that are not practiced by your community, then you are allowed to be concerned. So if you see them, for example, around their home buying things or eating in places where normal people wouldn't normally eat. So for example, if let's say people in the community don't normally eat out at non-kosher restaurants, and you see them eating out at non-kosher restaurants regularly, even if they're ordering things that could arguably be when in doubt. Not always. I mean, it's good to make a shikol hadas. It's good to make a wise decision. We often need more information. What you shouldn't do is assume the worst for some people. You should try to always assume the best and try to be on top of that. I'll come back to your question in a second. Let me get through the stuff I have written on here, and I'll come back to your questions. So if you're not sure if that couple or if that family is conducting themselves like everybody else, then as long as you generally see them practice like everybody else, you can assume that they're fine. And it's only if you know something is wrong. Okay, and you shouldn't judge a book by their cover. It's because somebody wears certain types of clothing, but you don't or they dress a certain way or a certain color yarmulke or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those aren't necessarily problematic things. So I don't want to get into too many details. So as a general rule, you kind of have to look and see, do they adhere to what the rest of the community does? And if they seem to, then that's fine. When you get to their house, I had a case one time when someone told me they went to somebody's house and they were taking kugel out of the oven on Shabbos. And I said, well, how do they set up the oven? I don't know. The kugel was very hot. I said, well, did they put a liner in there? Did they put upside down cake pans in there? Sometimes you can use an oven on Shabbos. It's not so hot. It's not so this. It's not so that. So there's some different people have different rules for that, have made different reactions to it. So that's the story with that. Okay, a few more questions that were in here. So here was another question. This question was, so they made cookies in the morning, okay, and they made cookie dough, and the bracha they said on it, before baking, they tasted it and made shahak kol. And after they cook the cookies, it's now mazonos. So why is that? Why is the bracha change? Well, because at first it wasn't actually the final product. You have to have the final product that's edible in order to say a mazonos on it. So this rule also applies to unfinished fruits and or vegetables when they are not in their edible state. So for example, if you eat an onion, that's not really where it's edible. It's shahak kol. It's not really pleasant, it's not really edible, but you're still eating it and benefiting from it, right? Or an uncooked potato. So this rule still applies. And that's the idea, is that it's not considered a finished product yet. Okay. Here's a fun one. So this was another question I received. So what if you are doing carpool at your school and the school imposes a fine for being late? So initially the school said that you can't come late. And then they would give the parents a stern stare down and make them feel awkward. And they were kind of getting tired of the parents coming late. So then they imposed the fine. And they found the fine had the opposite intent by making them pay. People were like, oh, I just pay and that's fine. Okay? So the question is, what are there any halakhic problems with that? So some person mentioned, well, is it a problem of charging interest, charging ribis? It wouldn't be, because you didn't actually forward them money and then they're making you pay to wait in this case. So it's not like you've reserved a spot in camp and they want to give you a discount or in school, they want to give you a discount for fronting the money, and they'll charge you more for making them wait to receive the money. If they were doing that, then that would be a case of where it would be ribis, would be interest. So the problem over here is that there's probably something in the handbook that describes what your agreement is with the school for doing carpool. And the agreement is that you should appear on time. And now they tell you, okay, you're not going to appear on time, so you're going to pay a fine. Well, there's two issues. Number one, you have an agreement. If you violate the agreement, you are what's called a mechusar emanah. You are considered an untrustworthy person. That's just not nice. Does it violate the contract? Yes. Is it contemptible? Yes. So it just means you've done something contemptible, but the Torah doesn't punish it because the Torah didn't tell you to do it. So I can't give you lashes or anything. It's just that people should feel uncomfortable trusting you. And that's the problem. And that is not a good feeling to have. Talmud says that you shouldn't enter into a contract under the impression of, I'm not sure what that word is. So I don't know what seducha means. Where was I? So the issue over here is also that now I assess you with a fine. Well, is that fine binding or not? The answer probably is no, because assessing fines especially if this was I make the rule, there's certain ways under Jewish law rules can be made. I can't unilaterally, even as a school, make fines for you. Why? Because I'm not the government. I can't impose a law upon you. There's a way in which normal laws can be instituted in community settings. You have to create a community government. If you don't have a community government, and the whole community is organized by them, which used to have in Europe before Jewish people had civil rights and were part of the regular government. There was a separate Jewish government that made all the shots. So if they wanted to impose a fine for being late, they were the legislature and they could appoint tzedakah. Okay. No, this wouldn't be a case of tzedakah. It would be a case of what's called asmachta, where since I'm not a judicial body and I'm not a legislative body, I'm just a school. I can't impose a fine on you unilaterally because we don't have a contract where I can just say, oh, you're just going to pay money to me. All Jewish contracts need to have some consideration in the contract that's exchanged. So I can't just randomly tell you you get to pay fines. So this contract would be not binding, and if they take the money, they would probably have to give it back because they are not allowed to simply impose fines. However, these parents saw it the other way, where they thought, oh, this is a new contract where I pay you to keep my kid longer. And so in that case, then they're now paying for a service. The problem is that that's not a contract. No one agreed to that. So if they start doing it, they just started doing it and it continued that way, then that might be an implied contract. So that's how it would work. But you wouldn't be allowed to do it otherwise. I actually one time complained about a clause in a school handbook that said that they could confiscate the cell phones. So they could take the cell phone away from the child they brought to school and hold on to it. Well, they're actually not allowed to because it's theft and you're not allowed to steal. And that one time happened to me, and I told them, they said, didn't you read the school contract? I said, yes. I said, it's not a valid contract under halacha because you're violating gezela. And the Menahel said, what? I said, everybody does this. I said, yeah, they're relying on Rav Asher Weiss. I said, the world doesn't revolve around Rav Asher Weiss. He is welcome to a shita. You didn't tell me that's what you're being samech on. We don't have an agreement to that, and so therefore you have to return the item because it is my item. And I said, even if you thought we had a contract, this is not a valid one. And so he returned the phone without another word, mostly because I don't think he wished to belabor the point with me. Now, was I on 100% in the right? No. I went and looked into it further, and I found that Rav Mordechai Tendler quotes his grandfather, Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, having to deal with the same situation. But they were dealing with Walkmans and playing that for schmutzter rock and roll. How could they have brought this schmutz into the yeshiva? So what they would do is they would confiscate the devices and hold on to it until the end of the session. And so Rav Moshe was asked, was theft or not? So Rav Moshe has an interesting chiddush that's not found in other places, in which he argues theft is the idea to deprive someone of their object. So it's only theft when I intend to deprive you of it. And in this case, I'm not depriving you of it. I'm simply removing it from your presence. So I went and apologized to the Menahel and told him I found it in Rav Moshe. However, they need to actually rewrite the contract. So that way they should understand that the item is being held onto. They can't confiscate, because confiscate sounds like you have to do something to get it back. And if you were to request it, they'd have to return it to you. Those seem to be the conditions of it. So they could take it away from the child, and the child may not know they could ask for it back. But as soon as they request it, you must give it back to them. Otherwise, if you're not returning it to them, you have a mitzvah to give it back to them. So those were the questions we received in the chat earlier. Let us review our live chat here to see other questions we received live over here. Okay. So one question is, if the power goes out and comes back on during Shabbos, and the hot water urn thus reboils again, can the water be used? What if one was away but suspect this happened? Okay, well, that's a very interesting question. Because the assumption is that I wouldn't be allowed to go ahead and have an item do malacha for me on Shabbos. So that's true. However, in this case, you set the item up before Shabbos to do the malacha for you. And even if the power goes out, it's entirely possible that the water is still above Yad Solat Espo, means it's above the temperature whereby it's considered fully cooked. And when the power went out, if you haven't tested it, you can also assume that temperature has not changed. It it's insulated and holds the temperature, fine. And now it turns back on. So you haven't done anything to remove the water from the flame. It's as if the flame comes back on its own, and you've done everything to set it up for Shabbos that you won't come and quote unquote stoke the coals. So you haven't violated Chazara. You haven't requested that a non-Jew turn it on for you, etc., etc., etc. And so as a result, if it does turn on for you, that would be acceptable. This would also work in a situation if you were to set a timer for before Shabbos and the water's already there, and the stuff comes on. That would be acceptable to do on Shabbos, possibly to be able to be done on Shabbos. And so the urn is not doing a job for you on Shabbos. Now, Rav Moshe didn't like this idea, and he decided to only permit this for things like air conditionings. However, a number of later poskim, and especially cautious agencies, were like, we really could use this. let's go ahead and make use of it. So while he was objecting to it, there was a lot of support to it. Let's see if I have other questions here in the chat. Okay, I don't see any further questions. Are there any other questions in the chat over here? Let's see. It says, is it true that when what's this question again? Went away. That when you touch your beard, Hashem rejoices. I've never heard that before. That's quite interesting. So those are the questions that we have for today. Were there any other questions that we have here for? Okay, so that's what we had discussed over here. I'll just say a couple other. Oh, you have another question? Oh, okay. Okay, so one other interesting point is when you hire workers, you should make sure to stipulate what your intentions are. So, for example, in the case we talked about earlier, where you had the people who were volunteering, if at any point during the volunteer they decide they want to be paid for it, that's fine. They can also make other statements saying that we're concerned about XYZ, and you can also stipulate that the other party who's benefiting from you doing something share in any potential damages that could accrue as a result of hauling the trailer. You could make all these types of stipulations, which means you would go from being a worker with them to being a partner with them, and then you would basically be requesting that they share some of the risk with you, and that would help to avoid the pitfalls of just doing it all and taking it all on yourself. Let's see. Okay, here's a question. What if someone admits that the local rabbis do not accept their family as Jewish, but they in their original country practice and believe that it was the case? And one second, I ran out of the chat. Disappeared here. Practice and believe that it was their heritage, and they want you to eat. So they're gonna cook for you and all those other things. So so in their first country, they lived and practiced as Jews, and then they came to the new country, and the rabbis there ruled that they're not Jewish. Okay, so they came to the new place. So I'm assuming you're asking, in the new place, the rabbis ruled that they weren't Jewish, even though they carried themselves as Jewish and they practiced Judaism, and so on and so forth. That's a delicate and difficult issue. So it's a hard thing. So number one, you're supposed to follow your local Beis Din. Your local Jewish court is supposed to be an authority. Nowadays, we just kind of have people who perform perfunctory acts and attach themselves to other Batei Din who are also supposed to know what to do. And so a local rabbi usually can't make such a decision. What they can do is do some investigative work to find out if the parties are actually Jewish. So people can come in and start practicing Judaism and claim they're Jewish. And the truth is that the basic letter of law would seem to support them being able to do that. We have some cases of people who are missionaries attempting to sneak into Jewish communities and do missionary work as Christians trying to proselytize by pretending to be observant. So you can go ahead, and if you believe that this is a concern, you can go ahead and exercise more caution. If in their previous community, the rabbis there treated them as full Jews, it would be really suspect of the new rabbi to believe that they are not, and it would require some investigation on both sides. Sometimes people are just petty. Sometimes people are misinformed. Sometimes they just they're enforcing certain local customs. So it depends. So you have to make sure to rule out some types of petty behaviors that are not al pi halacha. But for the most part, if they came to the new community and the local rabbi has said not to eat from them, you're supposed to accept that. If your local rabbi is not considered, is just considered somebody who basically is raising money from the community to run his own synagogue and to support his ends, but he wasn't actually hired by the community, meaning so he does his own fundraising, but the community doesn't pay for him to be there, and you simply are kind of freeloading off of the community by attending his services. And you don't really accept him as an authority, then you have to make your own decision about whether these people are religious or not. So you should contact another authority who could probably investigate it for you, if you don't believe the local rabbi is competent to render that decision, or if he's not appointed by you. Again, a person is only an authority if accepted by the community as such. And if you find them to be not an authority, you need to demonstrate that, number one. And number two, you probably should find a new authority. So those are the two main points that I would make with that. If there are no further points to ponder for the evening, we will pick up with Ask the Rabbi in a week or two, depending on how many questions we get. Thank you, everyone, for attending Ask the Rabbi Volume 1. And we will see you soon. Remember to subscribe and like the channel. We have lots of other classes in here. We have regular halakha classes. We have classes on Mishnah Berurah, and we completed the entire work of Avas Chesed, an entire work of all types of charity work that can be done for the Jewish people. We're now doing Shmiras Halashon, and just keep posted and keep informed as we post lots and lots of live classes. Thank you, everyone, to attend. Thank you for everyone who watched. Thank you to everybody who contributed. Have a wonderful evening.